All right. So moving right along, we have Achieve Energy. They offer ground source heat pumps, and Larry Lessard is going to share his information with us.
Thank you, Carolyn. I'll just immediately share my screen. So I'm Larry Lessard. I'm from Achieve Renewable Energy. Our solo Meet the Installer event is tomorrow. So that gives me the ability to touch on things pretty lightly tonight, and people only have to wait until tomorrow to hear more detail. Tonight I'm going to talk about what geothermal or ground source heat pump heating and cooling is, show some examples of the components, talk a little bit about the price structure under Solarize Plus and financial incentives and financing information, and then question and answers at the end after all the presentations. Ground source heat pump is most commonly a whole house heating and cooling solution. Some of the other technologies that have been presented so far can either be whole house or sometimes can be very efficient to provide heating and cooling to part of a home. Geothermal is normally done for the entire house and normally done for both heating and cooling. And we most frequently install ducted heating and cooling systems with the ground source heat pumps, though radiant floors work very well with ground source heat pump, as does domestic hot water. And there are ductless ground source heat pump systems now that are becoming popular and that we can provide under this program. Distribution through baseboard can be done, but only under very specific circumstances. And if someone already has an infrastructure consisting of radiators, that's probably not going to be something that we would do geothermally, and there would be some replacement with one of the other distribution methods. So the first thing you need is a volcano. Everyone knows that about geothermal, but we do Geoexchange, where we're exchanging heat with the soil and bedrock. So you don't need to have a volcano in your neighborhood for our system to work perfectly fine. Our equipment can be, as well, I'll show you in a little while, can be attached to a variety of ground source heat exchange configurations. But in this cartoon example, there's a vertical system on this house, and in the wintertime on the left, heat is extracted from the fluid in that ground loop and then gets returned colder because we've extracted heat from it, and then it travels through the ground loop and rewarms, and that cycle repeats. In the summertime, when you're doing air conditioning, the cycle is essentially the opposite, where the ground source heat pump is injecting heat into the ground, taking it from the house and putting it into the ground, and that's circulating through the ground loop and coming back again more temperate or cooler in temperature, and then that cycle again continues. This graphic was prepared by Water Furnace, the manufacturer whose equipment we sell, and it shows the approximate cost range for every million BTUs that are delivered to a home. And we can see, and this echoes somewhat the greenhouse gas emission information that Joel showed. A fossil fuel like propane or fuel oil or even natural gas has a significant cost above that of operation of an efficient geothermal system. And indeed the greenhouse gas reduction follows a similar pattern. Here's some pictures of some typical ground source heat pumps. The units towards the center, the four tall ones, are ducted ground source heat pumps. These are what we would call a package system with the ground source heat pump components in this bottom compartment and the air handler that has the fan and all of that that moves the air into the house in this larger section above. The two can be separated, and so you can have a remote air handler and a remote geothermal unit, and that's often convenient when you're putting one unit in the basement to supply a first floor and another unit in the attic to supply an upper level. The unit here all the way on the right, the ground source heat pump all the way on the right, is what our industry calls a water-to-water unit, meaning it makes heated or chilled water. So this is the look of a device that would be used for radiant flooring, domestic hot water, that sort of thing. Ground heat exchangers come in different flavors. The four main categories are shown here. Of these, the one in the bottom left, while popular in other states, is not common here in Massachusetts because of the way ponds are owned, and also because of permitting to be doing work within the wetland area. But the other three that are shown are quite common in Massachusetts. Horizontal closed loop in the upper left, where there'd be a relatively large excavation and heat exchange tubing installed, and all that heat exchange would happen in the soil. In the upper right is a vertical closed loop system, so that's installed with a drilling rig and uses very little area on the lot. The borings can be quite deep, 200 to 500 feet, depending on the heating and cooling demand we're trying to provide. And in the bottom right is a groundwater-based system. This shows a pump at the bottom of the well, water coming up, being processed through the equipment, and then discharged someplace else. That's not really the way it's done here in Massachusetts. We would pump from the well, process through the equipment, and put the water back in the well on the opposite end from the pump. So in this case, on the top, because the pump's shown on the bottom. And that configuration is called a standing column well. And sometimes if people have an existing irrigation or even a domestic supply well, that can be repurposed to have a dual use, depending upon permitting issues and also the size of or the depth of the well. As was mentioned previously, all of the installers presenting tonight have been vetted through qualifications and then also selected based on pricing. In our case, we had to bid three base systems. Three systems that were similar, other than the size of the system being installed, and we provided that base pricing to adjust the base pricing to a real house instead of the house in the scenario. The program uses adders, which actually are, maybe we should call them modifiers, because they can add or subtract from the scope of work depending on the nature of the project. So you can add things like zoning, or add domestic hot water, or other factors, but sometimes a particular base system has more drilling than is needed on a particular home, and so the net effect on the price can be either up or down. The base system and adder pricing is publicly available, so that you can compare our proposal to the information that's published and know that we're providing you the same pricing that we promised to give you under the program. Most of our projects do include options that are added via the adders, and some common examples would be zoning. Ground source heat pumps are very good at supplying multiple thermostat locations from one machine. Internet connectivity and monitoring, and then additional heating and cooling capacity, whether that be more ground heat exchanger or more equipment, or both. And the financial incentives for a ground source heat pump are somewhat similar to those for solar hot water. There's a 26% federal tax credit for projects we finish this year. That changes to 22% for projects finished next year. The Massachusetts Department of Energy Resources has an alternative energy credit program, and the number of credits you get depends upon the size of your home, and the pricing of the credits fluctuates on an open market, but usually our projects this year have had AEC values in the range of $2,000 to $5,000. The Mass CEC has a ground source heat pump grant program that now has very limited funding remaining and will probably not be available much more than a month from now. And then one thing that's very popular with all of our clients, there's no mass sales tax on ground source heat pumps, so every day is tax-free weekend. And under Solarize, we have some financing options similar to Joel's presentation. For the air source heat pump, there's a 7-year 0% interest loan from MassSave that can be up to $25,000 for a single family or $50,000 for a 2 to 4 residential unit building. We also offer financing through Interbank that provides the same as cash options. And depending on what equipment's being purchased, that's either 90 days or 12 months with no payments, no interest, as long as you pay off before the end of that term. And that can be up to $65,000. That's a popular bridge to seeing benefit from some of the other financial incentives like the tax credit or the alternative energy credit payments. Now, we don't approve those loans, the lenders do, and so they will set terms, but have been good partners for us, and we expect things to play out as I've presented tonight. And then that's the end of our presentation for today. We'll have a more detailed presentation tomorrow. And we look forward to answering any questions you have at the general Q&A section. Thank you.